Let's talk about why we are using cloud providers like Azure in this video. Imagine that you are building an application and you want to deploy that application. And a traditional way to deploy that application is to acquire all the infrastructure you need for deploying that application. So that includes things like your server, networking devices, and all the other components that goes with it. You'll be acquiring all of them and you'll be setting up your own data center, and that will be called on-premises data center, and you'll be deploying your application in that on-premises data center, right? So this is like buying a house. And an alternative is to go with cloud provider. So with cloud provider, rather than buying your own infrastructure, you are renting the infrastructure from the cloud provider. So in this case, Microsoft, they'll have all the components that you need for deploying the application. You'll simply be renting it from the Microsoft and deploying your application in it. When you are buying everything to set up your initial infrastructure, then that cost will be considered as capital expenditure. On the other hand, if you are renting everything from cloud providers like Microsoft, then the cost incurred for that will be considered as operational expenditure. Why this is important? Well, this is important because depending on whether it is capital expenditure or operational expenditure, the taxes are going to be different. Because if it is operational expenditure, you can actually put them down as expenses of your business. And generally, in most countries, if it is expenses of your business, you don't need to pay tax on it. And also when it comes to buying versus renting, if you are buying everything, then your initial cost is going to be really high and you are still going to have some moderate maintenance cost. Whereas if you are renting, then your initial and maintenance cost will always be same. It will be more or less same throughout the time that you are renting it, right? So you don't need to put in large upfront initial investment for acquiring your infrastructure. And also, the value of your infrastructure will decrease over time if you have acquired everything. For example, you have bought some servers. Over time, those servers will be outdated. You probably need to buy a new servers. So in general, the value of your infrastructure will go down. Whereas if you're renting, then the value remains the same because you don't own them. You're just renting it from the cloud provider, and it is cloud provider's responsibility to give you the latest and greatest infrastructure. So your value, the value that you are getting out of the infrastructure renting from a cloud provider is going to be the same. So the value is not going to change over time, right? So that is another important benefit. And also, most cloud providers offer consumption-based pricing. So if you are actually buying your infrastructure, no matter what kind of load you receive, you still have paid all the money that you need to pay for your initial infrastructure. If it turns out to be that you don't have that much traffic, you only use fraction of your infrastructure, you still have paid all the money that you have paid for acquiring the infrastructure. Whereas if you're renting and also the cloud provider offers you consumption-based pricing, then you will only be paying for what you use. Rather than paying a fixed fee, you'll only be paying for the amount of infrastructure or services that you are consuming. So that is consumption-based pricing. This is a huge win for most of the businesses. And other important thing is something called economies of scale. Economies of scale goes something like this. The higher the scale, the lower the unit price is. Imagine that you are a small scale manufacturer and you are manufacturing doormat. And there is another company which is much bigger in size and they are manufacturing very high volume of doormats. And because they are much larger in scale, they'll be able to optimize their operating cost and they'll be able to offer products at a cheaper rate. So the doormat that you make will probably cost you say $10. Then the larger company which makes the doormat might probably only cost them $5. Why? Because they have large scale production. So they'll be able to optimize their operational efficiency. And also because larger in business size, they'll be able to negotiate raw materials for a cheaper price. So in the end, their cost per unit will be much lower compared to small scale manufacturer, right? So that means the product that they sell will be cheaper compared to the product that is sold by the small scale manufacturer. And the same effect is applicable for cloud providers like Azure. Because Azure is such a large cloud provider, they'll be able to acquire hardwares at a cheaper cost and they'll be able to operate in a very efficient manner as well, which means they'll be able to offer you the services at a cheaper price compared to operating them yourself. So that is economies of scale, and this is applicable for most of the cloud providers. If you are using cloud services, you will be able to get the benefits of economies of scale. And the next one is flexibility. Most cloud providers will offer all these different types of services. They are infrastructure as services, platform as a service, and the software as a service. So most of the cloud providers will offer all these three different types of service model and even more. Because of this, you'll be able to choose what is suitable for your business model, right? So you're not restricted to one particular way of doing things. You'll be able to pick and choose what works for your business rather than going with what the service providers are offering, right? So you have that flexibility with service model. And when it comes to flexibility, the other type of flexibility is hybrid model. So it's not that you only have to use cloud for all of your services. If you already have on-premises infrastructure, you don't have to migrate everything to cloud immediately. You can start with some bits in cloud and you can leave the rest in on-premises itself, and you can slowly migrate them. So it supports hybrid approach where you have both on-premises and cloud-based infrastructure working together to benefit your business. And because of all these things, it is much better to use cloud-based infrastructure over on-premises infrastructure, right? I hope this is useful. Thank you.